Marcus Chen had been invisible at Summit Industries for 3 years, and that's exactly how he preferred it. The 29-year-old software engineer arrived at the Chicago headquarters every morning at 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes before anyone else, carrying the same worn leather messenger bag and wearing variations of the same unremarkable button-down shirts and khaki pants. His cubicle sat in the furthest corner of the 4th floor, wedged between a broken printer and a filing cabinet that hadn't been opened since the Clinton administration. The nameplate on his desk read simply, M. Chen, Technical Support, a title that grossly undersold his actual capabilities but perfectly served his need to remain unnoticed.
Marcus had learned the art of strategic invisibility during his childhood in San Francisco's Chinatown, where standing out could mean unwanted attention from both bullies and well-meaning teachers who wanted to showcase their exceptional Asian student. His parents, recent immigrants who ran a small electronics repair shop, had taught him that competence was more valuable than recognition, that solving problems quietly was often more effective than announcing your solutions to the world.
At Summit Industries, a mid-sized tech company that specialized in enterprise software solutions, Marcus had cultivated the perfect cover. His official job description involved basic technical support, helping employees with password resets, printer issues, and the occasional software glitch. What his colleagues didn't know was that Marcus possessed a master's degree in computer science from MIT, had published papers on artificial intelligence in journals they'd never heard of, and had turned down job offers from Google, Microsoft, and Apple to work in this unremarkable cubicle for a fraction of what he could have earned elsewhere. The reason for this career self-sabotage was complicated, rooted in a betrayal that had nearly destroyed his faith in the tech industry entirely. 2 years ago, Marcus had been the lead developer at Neural Sync Technologies, a cutting-edge AI startup that was developing revolutionary machine learning algorithms. He'd created something unprecedented, an AI system that could learn and adapt at unprecedented speeds, with applications ranging from medical diagnosis to financial modeling. But his business partner and best friend since college, David Zhang, had stolen the code and sold it to a Chinese conglomerate for $40 million. The theft had been so sophisticated, so carefully planned, that Marcus couldn't prove his intellectual property had been stolen. David's lawyers had buried him in legal paperwork, and the startup world's informal networks had somehow painted Marcus as the disgruntled employee who couldn't handle his partner's success. The betrayal had cost Marcus everything: his company, his reputation in Silicon Valley, his savings from fighting the legal battle, and worst of all, his trust in collaborative innovation. He'd retreated to Chicago, changed his name from Marcus Chen Wu to the simpler Marcus Chen, and deliberately sought out the most anonymous position he could find. But hiding his brilliance proved impossible. Within weeks of starting at Summit Industries, Marcus had quietly rewritten the company's entire customer database system, eliminating bugs that had plagued the sales team for years. He'd automated dozens of routine processes, created seamless integrations between software platforms that had never worked together properly, and solved technical problems that had stumped the official IT department for months. His method was always the same: identify a problem, develop a solution during lunch breaks or after hours, and implement it so smoothly that people assumed the improvements had happened naturally. His official performance reviews were consistently satisfactory, exactly where he wanted them, while his unofficial impact on the company's efficiency was enormous. The other employees at Summit Industries had developed their own theories about Marcus. Some thought he was overqualified and biding his time before moving to a better job. Others suspected he was related to someone in management and was coasting on connections. A few of the more observant staff members had noticed that technical problems seemed to solve themselves whenever Marcus was around, but they attributed it to coincidence rather than skill. Jessica Rodriguez, the company's head of human resources, had been watching Marcus for months with growing curiosity. Something about his employment file didn't add up: a technical support role that paid barely above entry level. Yet he'd listed MIT as his alma mater, and had somehow passed the company's notoriously difficult technical assessment with a perfect score. When she'd tried to verify his background, she'd found gaps in his employment history that suggested he was either hiding something significant or had experienced some kind of professional setback. But it was Derek Morrison, Summit Industries' newly appointed Chief Technology Officer, who would ultimately shatter Marcus's carefully constructed anonymity. Morrison had been brought in from a competing firm with a mandate to modernize the company's technology infrastructure and improve operational efficiency. He was everything Marcus had learned to avoid: loud, ambitious, politically connected, and absolutely convinced that innovation required large teams, massive budgets, and maximum visibility. Morrison's first company-wide meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November, and attendance was mandatory for all technical staff. Marcus arrived early, choosing a seat in the back corner where he could observe without being noticed. The conference room filled with Summit's 50-person technical team, from senior developers to junior analysts, all eager to hear about the new CTO's vision for the company's future. Morrison made his entrance with the practiced confidence of someone who'd given the same presentation at 3 previous companies. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore an expensive suit that suggested success rather than technical competence. His PowerPoint presentation was titled, "Innovation Through Integration: Leveraging Synergistic Solutions for Maximum Market Penetration." "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, his voice carrying the rehearsed enthusiasm of a motivational speaker, "Summit Industries is falling behind. Our competitors are implementing cutting-edge technologies while we're still struggling with basic integration issues. Our customer database system crashes twice a week. Our sales platform doesn't communicate with our inventory management software, and our mobile applications are so slow that users are jumping to competitors." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Every problem Morrison was describing had been solved months ago, quietly and efficiently, during Marcus's off-hours troubleshooting sessions. The database crashes had been eliminated by optimizing query structures. The integration issues had been resolved through custom APIs he'd developed. The mobile applications ran smoothly after he'd refactored their underlying code architecture. But Morrison continued, oblivious to these improvements. "I've identified 12 critical technical challenges that require immediate attention. My plan is to establish cross-functional teams, each led by senior developers, to tackle these issues systematically. We'll need to allocate significant resources. I'm talking about a $2 million technology upgrade budget and the hiring of at least 8 additional senior programmers."
The presentation went on for an hour, with Morrison outlining expensive solutions to problems that Marcus had already solved using existing resources and creative programming. The irony was painful. Summit Industries was about to spend millions of dollars and months of development time to achieve what one person had already accomplished in his spare time. During the question and answer session, Morrison's arrogance became more apparent. When junior developers suggested alternative approaches, he dismissed their ideas with condescending explanations about enterprise-level thinking and scalable solutions. When someone asked about the timeline for these improvements, Morrison explained that real innovation couldn't be rushed and that the company should expect to see results within 18 to 24 months. As the meeting broke up, Marcus overheard Morrison talking to Sarah Kim, the senior developer who managed most of the company's client-facing applications. "Sarah, I need you to assemble a team to tackle the database integration issues. This is our highest priority. Customers are complaining about system crashes and data inconsistencies. I want your best people on this, and don't worry about overtime costs. We need to fix this problem before it costs us major clients." Marcus knew that Sarah was about to spend months working on a problem that had been completely resolved. The database system hadn't crashed once in the past 6 months, and the integration issues were functioning flawlessly through the custom solutions he'd implemented. But pointing this out would require revealing his role in the improvements, effectively ending his anonymity and exposing him to the kind of corporate politics he'd been avoiding. That evening, Marcus sat in his small one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, staring at his laptop screen and wrestling with a familiar dilemma. He could continue hiding in the shadows while Morrison's teams wasted time and money solving already solved problems. Or he could speak up and risk everything he'd built during his 3 years of intentional obscurity. His apartment was sparse but organized, reflecting the same methodical approach he brought to programming. A single bookshelf held technical manuals and classic literature. His desk featured 2 monitors, a mechanical keyboard, and a coffee mug from his MIT graduation that he'd somehow never been able to throw away, despite the painful memories it represented. On his personal laptop, Marcus kept a folder labeled Summit Solutions that contained every piece of code he'd written for the company, every system improvement he'd implemented, and detailed documentation of how each solution worked. It was a comprehensive record of 3 years of invisible innovation, worth millions in development costs and representing the kind of technical achievement that could establish a career. But opening that folder meant admitting that Marcus Chen was not just a technical support employee who helped people reset their passwords. It meant revealing that he was someone who could single-handedly solve problems that entire teams of senior developers couldn't figure out. It meant risking exposure, recognition, and all the complications that came with being visible in a corporate environment. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from his sister Lisa, who worked as a product manager at a tech startup in Austin. Saw your old partner David Zhang on TechCrunch again. Neural Sync just got acquired by Microsoft for $200 million. Still think hiding in Chicago was the right move? The message stung because Lisa was asking the same question Marcus asked himself every day. David Zhang was being celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur, while Marcus filed technical support tickets and pretended not to understand advanced programming concepts. The AI system that Marcus had created was now generating hundreds of millions in revenue for Microsoft, while its actual creator earned $45,000 a year helping people with printer problems. But there was something else in Lisa's message, a challenge that Marcus recognized from their childhood. Lisa had always been the bold one, willing to take risks and fight for recognition, while Marcus preferred the safety of working behind the scenes. She'd been pushing him for months to stop hiding and start building something again. But Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to trust the collaborative process that had already betrayed him once. The next morning brought an unexpected complication that would force Marcus's hand. He arrived at his usual time to find Derek Morrison standing at his cubicle, examining the modest setup with the calculating gaze of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You're Marcus Chen," Morrison said, not quite making it a question. "Technical support, level 2 certification, 3 years with the company?" Marcus nodded, immediately on guard. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Morrison?" Morrison picked up the MIT coffee mug from Marcus's desk, turning it over in his hands like evidence in an investigation. MIT, class of 2019, computer science. That's an interesting background for someone in technical support. Most of our support staff come from community colleges or boot camp programs. "I like solving problems," Marcus replied carefully. "The degree just helps me understand the technical details better." Morrison set down the mug and pulled out his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be performance metrics. "I've been reviewing our system logs, and I've noticed some interesting patterns. Database performance improvements that weren't scheduled or documented, security patches that appeared overnight, integration solutions that seem to have implemented themselves. IT has no record of these changes, but the improvements are substantial and sophisticated." Marcus felt his carefully constructed anonymity beginning to crack. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Sure. I mean," Morrison continued, his voice sharpening with interest, "that someone with serious programming skills has been making unauthorized changes to our core systems. Changes that would normally require senior developer clearance and extensive testing protocols. Either we have a security breach, or we have an employee who's significantly more capable than their job description suggests." The trap was closing around Marcus with the inexorable logic of code execution. Morrison had clearly been investigating the mysterious improvements to Summit's systems, and his technical background was sufficient to recognize sophisticated programming when he encountered it. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully, "if there have been improvements to system performance, isn't that a good thing, regardless of how they happened?" Morrison smiled with the expression of someone who just confirmed a suspicion. "That depends entirely on who made the improvements and why they felt the need to hide their involvement. Unauthorized system access is a termination offense, regardless of the results." The threat was clear, but so was the opportunity. Morrison wasn't just investigating a security breach. He was looking for the person responsible for innovations that had saved the company significant time and money. This was Marcus's chance to step out of the shadows, but it also meant risking everything he'd built during his 3 years of strategic invisibility. Before Marcus could respond, Morrison's phone rang with an urgent call that demanded his immediate attention. As the CTO walked away to handle what sounded like a crisis in the Seattle office, Marcus was left staring at his computer screen and realizing that his time in the shadows was probably over. That afternoon brought the crisis that would change everything. Summit Industries' largest client, a pharmaceutical company that generated 30% of the company's revenue, was threatening to terminate their contract due to what they described as persistent technical failures and unacceptable system downtime. The emergency meeting was called for 4 p.m., with all senior staff required to attend. Marcus wasn't invited, but he could hear the raised voices echoing from the conference room as Morrison tried to explain how a system that had been stable for months had suddenly started experiencing catastrophic failures. What Morrison didn't know was that the client's complaints were based on their experience with a backup system that lacked the improvements Marcus had made to the primary infrastructure. During a routine maintenance window, the client had been temporarily switched to the unmodified backup servers, exposing them to all the problems that Marcus had quietly solved months earlier. As Marcus listened to the crisis unfolding in the conference room, he realized that his moment of choice had arrived. He could remain silent and let Morrison's team spend weeks trying to solve problems that had already been solved, potentially losing the company's biggest client in the process. Or he could step forward with solutions that would save the contract but destroy his anonymity forever. The decision, when it came, surprised even Marcus himself. He was tired of hiding, tired of watching others struggle with problems he could solve in his sleep, tired of pretending to be less capable than he actually was. Marcus opened his laptop, accessed the Summit Solutions folder, and began preparing for a conversation that would either resurrect his career or destroy the last vestiges of his carefully constructed invisibility. In the conference room, Derek Morrison was about to learn that sometimes the most valuable person in an organization is the one everyone has been overlooking. The revelation. The emergency lasted until nearly 7 p.m., with Morrison's team scrambling to understand why systems that had been running smoothly were suddenly failing catastrophically for their biggest client. Marcus remained at his desk, ostensibly working on routine support tickets, but actually monitoring the company's network traffic and system logs through administrative access he'd quietly maintained for months. The problem was exactly what he'd suspected. The pharmaceutical client had been switched to backup servers during routine maintenance, and those servers still contained all the original bugs and inefficiencies that Marcus had eliminated from the primary systems. What should have been a transparent transition had instead exposed the client to database crashes, integration failures, and response times that were unacceptable for a mission-critical application. At 7:15 p.m., as the last of the senior staff filed out of the conference room looking defeated and exhausted, Marcus made his decision. He gathered the comprehensive documentation he'd been maintaining, walked to Morrison's office, and knocked on the door. Morrison looked up from his laptop with the haggard expression of someone who'd just spent 3 hours trying to explain technical failures he didn't fully understand. Marcus, right? Technical support. What can I do for you? Mr. Morrison, Marcus said, setting a thick folder on the desk. I believe I can help with the pharmaceutical client situation. Morrison glanced at the folder with mild interest. I appreciate the offer, but this is a complex system integration issue that requires senior-level expertise. Unless you've suddenly developed enterprise-level programming skills, I don't think technical support can. The backup servers are missing the database optimization protocols I implemented in March, Marcus interrupted quietly. The integration APIs I wrote in June aren't deployed on the secondary infrastructure. The caching algorithms that eliminated the response time issues were never migrated to the backup environment. The words hung in the air like a confession. Morrison's tired expression sharpened into focused attention as he processed what Marcus had just admitted. You implemented database protocols? Morrison asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. You wrote integration APIs? Marcus, those are senior developer responsibilities that require authorization from multiple departments. Marcus opened the folder and spread out printed documentation that represented months of careful work. Code listings, system diagrams, performance metrics, and detailed explanations of every improvement he'd made to Summit's infrastructure. This is everything, Marcus said simply. Every modification I've made to the company's systems over the past 3 years. Database optimization, security enhancements, integration solutions, mobile application improvements. The problems you've been planning to solve with your $2 million budget, they were solved months ago. Morrison stared at the documentation with the expression of someone trying to reconcile impossible information. The code samples were sophisticated, the system diagrams were professional quality, and the performance improvements were documented with the kind of precision that suggested deep technical expertise. This is impossible, Morrison said, though his voice lacked conviction. You're a technical support technician. This level of work requires years of advanced training, senior-level clearances, and MIT, class of 2019, Marcus said quietly. Computer science with a focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning. Before Summit Industries, I was the lead developer at NeuralSync Technologies. I created AI systems that are currently generating hundreds of millions in revenue for Microsoft. The revelation transformed Morrison's expression from confusion to intense interest. If that's true, what are you doing in technical support? Why are you hiding this level of expertise? Marcus sat down across from Morrison's desk, feeling the weight of 3 years of careful concealment finally lifting. Because I learned that being visible in the tech industry can be dangerous, I created something revolutionary at NeuralSync, and my business partner stole it. The legal battle destroyed my reputation, my savings, and my faith in collaborative innovation. I came here to hide, to work on problems quietly, without risking another betrayal. Morrison leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. So you've been solving our technical problems for 3 years while pretending to be underqualified? I've been fixing things that were broken, Marcus corrected. The database crashes that were driving away clients, the integration failures that were costing the company productivity, the security vulnerabilities that could have resulted in data breaches. I solved them quietly because that's what needed to be done. Morrison picked up one of the code listings, studying it with the eye of someone who understood advanced programming. This is sophisticated work. Enterprise-level solutions that would normally require teams of developers and months of testing. One person working efficiently can often accomplish more than a committee working through bureaucracy, Marcus replied. But that only works if the person is willing to remain invisible. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the documentation, and clearly trying to understand how he'd missed such significant talent in his own organization. Marcus, this pharmaceutical client crisis, can you fix it? It's already fixed, Marcus said, pulling out his laptop. I deployed the necessary patches to the backup servers about an hour ago. Database performance is now equivalent between primary and secondary systems. Integration APIs are functioning correctly. Response times are within acceptable parameters. Morrison's phone immediately buzzed with a text message. He read it quickly, his expression transforming from skepticism to amazement. That's the pharmaceutical client. They're reporting that all technical issues have been resolved. Performance is back to normal. The problems were solved the first time over a year ago, Marcus explained. Today's crisis was just a reminder of what the systems were like before the improvements were implemented. Morrison stood up and walked to his window, staring out at the Chicago skyline while processing the full implications of Marcus's revelation. You've been operating as a senior developer while hiding in a technical support role. You've solved millions of dollars worth of technical problems while being paid a fraction of market rate. And you did all of this to avoid drawing attention to yourself. I did it because the problems needed to be solved, Marcus said. But also because I wasn't ready to trust collaborative environments again. Working alone eliminated the risk of betrayal. Morrison turned back from the window with the calculating expression of someone who just realized he was sitting across from a significant opportunity. Marcus, I have a proposition for you. What if I told you that you could continue solving problems quietly, but with proper recognition and compensation? What if you could work on the cutting-edge projects you're clearly capable of handling, but with legal protections that would prevent anyone from stealing your innovations? Marcus felt a familiar chill of suspicion. What kind of proposition? I want to offer you a position as senior systems architect, reporting directly to me. Your own team, your own budget, and ownership protection for anything you develop. But more than that, I want you to help me transform this company into something that values innovation over politics, competence over connections. The offer was everything Marcus had once wanted and everything he'd learned to distrust. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of visibility. The last time I trusted someone with my innovations— I know about David Zhang, Morrison interrupted. I know about neural sync, and I know about the intellectual property theft. But I also know that hiding in technical support is a waste of your abilities and this company's potential. Marcus looked up sharply. How do you know about neural sync? Morrison smiled grimly. Because I've been investigating you since I arrived at Summit Industries. The mysterious system improvements, the perfect technical assessment scores, the MIT background that didn't match your job description. I needed to understand who you really were before I could decide how to proceed. The admission that Morrison had been investigating him should have alarmed Marcus, but instead it felt almost relieving. Someone had finally seen through his carefully constructed anonymity, and the sky hadn't fallen. What did your investigation tell you? Marcus asked. It told me that you're one of the most talented developers I've ever encountered, and that you've been systematically undervaluing yourself because of one bad experience with a dishonest partner. It also told me that Summit Industries has been accidentally employing someone who could revolutionize our entire technical infrastructure if he was willing to step out of the shadows. Morrison pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a detailed analysis of Summit's technical capabilities compared to their competitors. We're falling behind, Marcus, not because our technology is inferior, but because we're not leveraging our human resources effectively. You've proven that one person with exceptional skills can accomplish more than entire teams of average developers. Imagine what you could do with proper support and resources. Marcus studied the competitive analysis, recognizing several areas where his quiet improvements had kept Summit Industries competitive. And if I say no? if I prefer to remain in technical support? Then you remain in technical support, Morrison said simply. But you'll be doing it while watching this company slowly lose ground to competitors who are willing to innovate more aggressively. And you'll be wasting abilities that could change not just Summit Industries, but the entire enterprise software industry. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with an urgent message from Jessica Rodriguez in Human Resources. Marcus, need to see you immediately. There's been a complaint filed about unauthorized system access. Morrison noticed Marcus's expression change as he read the message. Problem? Someone filed a complaint about unauthorized system modifications, Marcus said, showing Morrison the message. I assume that someone was you. Morrison shook his head. I didn't file any complaints. My investigation was informal, and I haven't discussed your situation with HR. A chill ran down Marcus's spine as he realized that someone else had been watching his activities. Someone who had noticed the unauthorized system access, but hadn't connected it to the improvements in performance. Someone who saw security violations where Morrison had seen innovation. Mr. Morrison, Marcus said, standing to leave, I need to handle this situation with HR before we can continue our conversation. Morrison stood as well, his expression showing concern. Marcus, be careful what you admit to Jessica. HR departments aren't always equipped to understand the nuances of technical innovation. They tend to focus on policy violations rather than positive outcomes. Marcus nodded, gathering his documentation. I understand. But if I'm going to step out of the shadows, I need to do it honestly. No more hiding behind technical support credentials. As Marcus walked toward HR, he felt the familiar sensation of standing at a crossroads. 3 years of careful anonymity were about to end, one way or another. Either he would emerge from the shadows as the innovative developer he'd always been, or he would be terminated for policy violations and forced to rebuild his career somewhere else. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt ready for that confrontation. He was tired of hiding his abilities, tired of watching others struggle with problems he could solve effortlessly, tired of pretending to be less capable than he actually was. The conversation with Jessica Rodriguez would determine whether his revelation led to recognition or termination. But either way, Marcus Chen was done being invisible. Jessica Rodriguez's office was located on the second floor, a neutral space decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and company values that felt increasingly ironic as Marcus prepared to defend 3 years of unauthorized technical innovation. He knocked on the door at exactly 8 a.m. the following morning, carrying a laptop bag that contained evidence of either his greatest professional achievement or his most serious policy violation. Jessica was a competent HR director who'd built her career on careful attention to procedures and risk management. She'd been with Summit Industries for 5 years, long enough to understand the company culture, but not long enough to become complacent about potential liability issues. Her investigation into Marcus's activities had been prompted by an automated security alert that flagged unusual administrative access patterns during off hours. Marcus, please sit down, Jessica said, her tone professionally neutral, but carrying an undercurrent of concern. I need to discuss some irregularities that have come to my attention regarding your system access privileges. Marcus settled into the chair across from her desk, noting the formal setup of the meeting. Jessica had prepared a folder of documentation, and her computer screen displayed what appeared to be security logs. This wasn't going to be a casual conversation. I understand there may be some questions about technical work I've been doing, Marcus said, deciding to address the situation directly rather than waiting for accusations. Jessica consulted her notes. Marcus, our IT security team has identified over 200 instances of administrative-level system access from your account over the past 18 months. These include database modifications, server configuration changes, and software installations that are well beyond the scope of technical support responsibilities. Marcus nodded. That's accurate. I've been implementing improvements to various systems that needed optimization. Improvements that were never authorized, documented, or tested according to company protocols, Jessica continued. Marcus, unauthorized system modifications are grounds for immediate termination under Section 4.2 of the Employee Handbook. These actions could have compromised data security, violated client confidentiality agreements, or exposed the company to significant liability. The irony was sharp. The very improvements that had saved Summit Industries millions of dollars and prevented system failures were being framed as security violations. Marcus understood Jessica's perspective, but he also knew that bureaucratic procedures often prevented the kind of rapid innovation that modern technology required. Jessica, Marcus said carefully, I understand your concerns about procedures, but I need you to understand the context. Every modification I made was designed to solve serious problems that were affecting company operations and client satisfaction. Jessica pulled out printed reports from the IT department. According to these logs, you've accessed the customer database outside of normal business hours on multiple occasions. You've modified server configurations without approval from the systems administration team. You've installed software applications that haven't been cleared by our security review process. I've fixed database performance issues that were causing system crashes, Marcus corrected. I've optimized server configurations that were creating bottlenecks. I've implemented security patches that were protecting against known vulnerabilities. Jessica leaned forward with the patient expression of someone explaining obvious facts to a stubborn child. Marcus, your intentions may have been good, but intentions don't matter when it comes to security protocols. What matters is that you exceeded your authority, violated company policies, and created potential liability issues. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Derek Morrison entered without waiting for permission, his expression showing the urgency of someone who'd heard about a crisis in progress. Jessica, I need to speak with you about Marcus's situation, Morrison said, closing the door behind him. I believe there may be some context you're missing. Jessica's expression hardened slightly. Derek, this is a human resources matter involving policy violations. I don't think technical discussions are appropriate at this stage. Morrison ignored the warning and sat down next to Marcus. Jessica, are you familiar with the technical problems that Marcus has been solving? Do you understand the value of the improvements he's implemented? The value isn't the issue, Jessica replied firmly. The issue is that these improvements were implemented without authorization, without documentation, and without regard for established procedures. Morrison pulled out his tablet and opened a presentation he'd prepared overnight. Let me show you exactly what Marcus has accomplished, and then you can decide whether his methods justify his results. The presentation was comprehensive, detailing every system improvement Marcus had made over the past 3 years. Database optimization that had eliminated crashes and improved response times by 40%. Security enhancements that had prevented 3 potential data breaches. Integration solutions that had saved the company an estimated $1.2 million in third-party consulting fees. This is impressive work, Jessica admitted after reviewing the data, but it doesn't change the fact that none of it was authorized through proper channels. Morrison leaned forward with growing intensity. Jessica, Marcus single-handedly solved problems that my predecessor's team couldn't figure out in 3 years. He prevented client defections that could have cost us millions in revenue. He improved system security beyond industry standards. And he did all of this while earning a technical support salary because he was willing to work quietly without recognition. Jessica studied the presentation more carefully, beginning to understand the scope of Marcus's contributions. If this is accurate, why wasn't any of this work documented through normal project management channels? Marcus spoke for the first time in several minutes. Because I learned that collaborative innovation can be dangerous. My previous experience taught me that sharing credit for technical innovations can lead to theft, betrayal, and career destruction. I solved problems quietly because that was the only way I felt safe contributing. Jessica looked between Marcus and Morrison, clearly struggling to reconcile company policies with extraordinary circumstances. Marcus, I understand that you may have had negative experiences elsewhere, but Summit Industries has established procedures for good reasons, security protocols, authorization requirements, documentation standards. These exist to protect both the company and our employees. I agree, Marcus said. But those same procedures also prevent rapid response to critical problems. The database crashes that were driving away clients, the security vulnerabilities that could have resulted in data breaches, the integration failures that were costing productivity. These problems needed immediate solutions, not committee discussions and approval processes. Morrison sensed an opportunity to redirect the conversation. Jessica, what if we could find a way to formalize Marcus's contributions while addressing your procedural concerns? What if we could create a framework that allowed for rapid innovation within appropriate oversight structures? Jessica consulted her notes again, clearly weighing competing priorities. What kind of framework are you suggesting? A senior technical position that gives Marcus the authority to implement system improvements under my direct supervision, Morrison explained. Proper documentation, appropriate security clearances, and formal approval processes, but with the flexibility to respond quickly to urgent technical issues. Marcus felt a familiar surge of anxiety about increased visibility and responsibility. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of exposure. The last time I accepted a senior technical role, the last time you were working with unethical partners, Morrison interrupted. Summit Industries isn't Neural Sync Technologies, and I'm not David Zhang. But more importantly, hiding your abilities isn't protecting you. It's limiting your potential and wasting resources that could benefit everyone. Jessica looked at Marcus with new interest. Marcus, Derek mentioned Neural Sync Technologies. Can you help me understand that situation? Marcus spent the next 20 minutes explaining his history with Neural Sync, the intellectual property theft, and the legal battle that had destroyed his career in Silicon Valley. Jessica listened with growing understanding, beginning to see how professional betrayal might drive someone to seek anonymity and avoid collaborative environments. That's a terrible situation, Jessica said when Marcus finished. I can understand why you might be cautious about trusting new business relationships. But Marcus, you can't let one bad experience prevent you from contributing at your full potential. Morrison nodded emphatically. Jessica, this is exactly why we need to create better protections for innovative employees. Marcus has been contributing at a senior developer level while hiding in technical support because he doesn't trust the system to protect his interests. Jessica was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the documentation and considering the implications. When she finally spoke, her tone had shifted from accusatory to problem-solving. Marcus, I'm willing to work with you and Derek to find a solution that addresses both your security concerns and our procedural requirements. But I need your commitment that future system modifications will go through appropriate approval channels. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. I can agree to that, as long as the approval channels are designed to enable innovation rather than prevent it. Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the office. I think we can design procedures that protect both innovation and security interests. Jessica made notes on her legal pad. Then let's talk about what a senior technical position might look like, and what safeguards we can put in place to ensure that Marcus's innovations are properly protected. The conversation continued for another hour, with Morrison and Jessica collaborating to design a role that would formalize Marcus's contributions while addressing corporate policy requirements. Senior Systems Architect, reporting directly to the CTO, with authority to implement critical system improvements under documented oversight procedures. But the most important element was the intellectual property protection framework that Jessica proposed. Legal agreements that would ensure Marcus maintained ownership rights to his innovations while allowing Summit Industries to benefit from their implementation. Marcus, Jessica said as the meeting concluded, I want to be clear about something. What you've accomplished over the past 3 years is extraordinary. The policy violations were serious, but the value you've created far outweighs the procedural concerns. Going forward, we want to make sure you can continue innovating within a framework that protects both you and the company. Marcus nodded, feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in months. I appreciate that, Jessica. I'm willing to step out of the shadows if Summit Industries is committed to creating an environment where innovation is valued over politics. Morrison stood to leave, extending his hand to Marcus. Welcome to senior leadership, Marcus. I think you're going to find that being visible isn't as dangerous as you feared. As Marcus walked back to his cubicle to begin the transition to his new role, he felt the strange sensation of shedding a skin that had protected him but also constrained him. 3 years of strategic invisibility were ending, replaced by the opportunity to contribute openly to technical challenges that could shape Summit Industries' future. But the real test would come when news of his promotion spread through the company, and his colleagues discovered that the quiet technical support person they'd been overlooking was actually one of the most capable developers any of them had ever encountered. News of Marcus's promotion spread through Summit Industries with the speed of gossip in a small organization. By noon, everyone knew that the quiet technical support guy had somehow been elevated to senior systems architect, a position that typically required years of senior development experience and advanced technical credentials. The reactions ranged from confused murmurs to outright skepticism. Sarah Kim, who managed the client application development team, cornered Marcus at the coffee machine with barely concealed irritation. Marcus, right? She said, though they'd worked in the same building for 3 years. I heard about your promotion. Technical support to senior architect is quite a jump. What kind of experience qualified you for that kind of position? Marcus stirred his coffee slowly, recognizing the challenge in her tone. I've been working on system optimization and integration problems for the past few years, Marcus replied carefully. Mr. Morrison felt that experience was relevant to the senior architect role. Sarah's expression suggested she wasn't buying the explanation. System optimization? Marcus, I've been a senior developer here for 5 years, and I've never seen any work attributed to you on major system projects. What exactly have you been optimizing? Before Marcus could answer, Tom Bradley from the database administration team joined the conversation. Tom was known for his territorial attitude about database modifications and his suspicion of anyone who claimed to understand advanced SQL optimization. Chen, I heard Morrison put you in charge of database architecture, Tom said, his voice carrying an edge of professional skepticism. That's interesting, considering I've never seen you submit a single modification request through proper channels. What makes Morrison think you understand enterprise database management? Marcus found himself in the exact situation he'd been avoiding for 3 years, defending his technical competence to colleagues who had no idea what he'd been accomplishing behind the scenes. The irony was that both Sarah and Tom had been benefiting from his improvements for months without realizing it. I've been studying database optimization techniques, Marcus said diplomatically. I think there are opportunities to improve performance through better indexing strategies and query optimization. Tom laughed with the condescending tone of someone explaining obvious facts to a child. Marcus, Database optimization isn't something you learn from studying. It requires years of hands-on experience with enterprise-level systems, understanding of transaction processing, knowledge of replication strategies. It's not technical support work. Sarah nodded in agreement. Tom's right. Senior architecture positions require proven track records of successful implementations. I don't understand how Morrison made this decision without reviewing your portfolio of completed projects. Marcus was saved from further interrogation by the arrival of Derek Morrison, who had apparently been looking for him. Morrison's expression suggested he'd overheard enough of the conversation to understand the dynamics at play. "Sarah, Tom, good to see you," Morrison said with professional cheerfulness. "I was hoping to find Marcus. We have some system integration issues to discuss." Tom seized the opportunity to voice his concerns directly. "Derek, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about database modification protocols. If Marcus is going to be making changes to core systems, I need to ensure proper authorization procedures are followed." Morrison's smile remained pleasant, but gained an edge of steel. "Tom, that's exactly what I wanted to discuss. Marcus, could you walk Tom through the database optimization work you've been doing? I think he'd find it educational." Marcus felt the familiar tension of being forced into visibility, but Morrison's supportive presence gave him confidence to be more direct than usual. "Tom, you mentioned concerns about indexing strategies. Have you noticed any improvements in query response times over the past few months?" Tom frowned, clearly thinking about recent performance metrics. "Actually, yes. Database response times have improved significantly since the spring. We've been trying to figure out what changed." The primary customer database was re-indexed with clustered indexes on frequently queried fields, Marcus explained. Join operations were optimized by restructuring the relationships between user data and transaction logs. Query caching was implemented to reduce redundant database calls. Tom's skeptical expression slowly shifted to confusion. "Those are exactly the optimizations I've been planning to implement. How did you know about the indexing issues?" "Because I implemented those optimizations 6 months ago," Marcus said quietly, "along with stored procedure improvements that reduced transaction processing time by 30%. Sarah stared at Marcus with growing realization. "Wait, you've been making unauthorized modifications to production databases?" Morrison stepped in before the conversation could escalate. "Sarah, the modifications Marcus made prevented 3 major system failures and saved the company approximately $400,000 in emergency consulting fees. The unauthorized aspect is being addressed through new approval procedures." Tom looked back and forth between Marcus and Morrison, processing the implications. "You're telling me that Marcus has been performing senior-level database optimization for months without going through proper channels?" "I'm telling you that Marcus has been solving problems that your team couldn't identify," Morrison replied bluntly. "The question isn't whether his methods followed procedures. The question is whether you're willing to learn from someone who's already accomplished what you've been trying to do." The conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the building's PA system. "All technical staff, please report to Conference Room A for an emergency meeting. All technical staff to Conference Room A immediately." As they walked toward the conference room, Marcus felt the weight of curious stares from colleagues who were beginning to understand that their assumptions about the quiet technical support person might have been completely wrong. The emergency meeting would either vindicate Morrison's confidence in him or expose him to company-wide scrutiny that could make his position untenable. Conference Room A was packed with Summit Industries' entire technical team, from junior developers to senior project managers. Marcus chose a seat near the back, old habits making him prefer observation to visibility, but Morrison gestured for him to join the senior staff at the front table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, his voice carrying the authority of someone delivering important news, "we have a situation that requires immediate technical response. Our second largest client, Meridian Financial, is implementing a new regulatory compliance system that requires integration with our software within the next 2 weeks. Groans rippled through the room. Meridian Financial was known for complex technical requirements and tight deadlines. Their compliance systems were notoriously difficult to integrate with third-party software, and 2 weeks was barely enough time to analyze their requirements, let alone implement a solution. Sarah Kim raised her hand. Derek, 2 weeks isn't realistic for a Meridian integration. Their compliance systems require custom API development, extensive security protocols, and thorough testing procedures. We'd need at least 6 weeks to do this properly. Tom Bradley nodded in agreement. The database implications alone would require weeks of planning. Meridian's data structures are completely different from our standard client configurations. Morrison surveyed the room with the expression of someone who had anticipated these objections. I understand the technical challenges. That's why I'm assigning this project to our senior systems architect, Marcus Chen, who will have full authority to implement whatever solutions are necessary to meet Meridian's requirements. The announcement created a moment of stunned silence, followed by multiple conversations breaking out simultaneously. Marcus felt every eye in the room focused on him with mixtures of curiosity, skepticism, and concern. David Park, a senior developer who'd been with the company for 7 years, spoke for many of his colleagues. Derek, no disrespect to Marcus, but this is a critical client integration that could determine whether we retain a major account. Are we sure this is the right project for someone who's been in technical support? Marcus hasn't been in technical support, Morrison replied calmly. Marcus has been solving complex system integration problems while hiding behind a technical support job description. The difference is that now he'll be doing it with proper recognition and resources. Morrison pulled up a presentation on the conference room's main screen. Let me show you what Marcus has accomplished over the past 3 years, and then you can decide whether he's qualified to handle Meridian's integration requirements. The presentation was even more comprehensive than the one Morrison had shown Jessica Rodriguez. Detailed technical specifications, performance improvement metrics, before and after comparisons that demonstrated the scope and sophistication of Marcus's work. As the presentation progressed, the mood in the room shifted from skepticism to amazement. Sarah Kim leaned forward in her chair, studying code samples that showed programming techniques she hadn't seen before. Tom Bradley's earlier dismissiveness evaporated as he recognized database optimizations that surpassed anything his team had developed. This is senior-level work, Sarah admitted quietly. Marcus, where did you learn these integration techniques? Marcus felt the familiar discomfort of being the center of attention, but Morrison's supportive presence gave him confidence to answer honestly. I developed most of these techniques at my previous position. I've been adapting them to Summit's systems over the past 3 years. David Park studied the performance metrics with professional interest. These improvements are substantial. Marcus, why didn't you ever mention this work during team meetings? We could have been collaborating on these solutions. Because I learned that collaboration can be dangerous, Marcus replied. My previous experience taught me that sharing credit for innovations can lead to theft and betrayal. I worked quietly because that was the only way I felt safe contributing. The room fell silent as colleagues processed the implications of Marcus's statement. Several people exchanged glances that suggested they were reconsidering their assumptions about teamwork and recognition in corporate environments. Morrison seized the moment to redirect the conversation toward the immediate challenge. The Meridian integration requires exactly the kind of innovative problem-solving that Marcus has been demonstrating. Custom API development, real-time data synchronization, security protocols that meet federal compliance standards. This is an opportunity to showcase the level of technical capability that Summit Industries can provide. Tom Bradley raised his hand tentatively. Marcus, If you're leading this project, what kind of support do you need from the rest of the technical team? Marcus considered the question carefully. For 3 years, he'd worked alone to avoid the complications of collaborative development. But the Meridian project was too large and too complex for a single person to complete in 2 weeks, regardless of their technical skills. I'll need database support for the compliance data structures, Marcus said, looking directly at Tom. The regulatory requirements involve transaction logging that's more complex than our standard client configurations. Tom nodded eagerly. I can handle the database architecture. What else? Marcus turned to Sarah. Front-end integration will require custom user interface components that match Meridian's existing workflows. The compliance modules need to feel like natural extensions of their current systems. Sarah's earlier skepticism had transformed into professional interest. I've worked with Meridian's interface standards before. I can lead the UI development team. As team members volunteered for different aspects of the project, Marcus felt a gradual shift in the room's dynamics. The colleagues who had questioned his qualifications an hour earlier were now eager to collaborate with someone whose technical abilities had clearly exceeded their expectations. Morrison watched the team formation process with satisfaction. Excellent. Marcus, you have full project authority and whatever resources you need. The rest of the technical staff will provide support as requested. Our goal is to deliver an integration solution that exceeds Meridian's expectations and demonstrates Summit Industries' technical capabilities. As the meeting broke up, Marcus found himself surrounded by colleagues who wanted to discuss technical details, volunteer for project roles, and understand more about the innovations he'd been developing in isolation. The transformation from invisible technical support to senior technical leader was happening faster than he'd ever anticipated. But the real test would come when Marcus had to prove that his individual technical excellence could translate into successful team leadership. Managing a complex integration project under tight deadlines would require not just programming skills, but the ability to coordinate multiple developers, manage competing priorities, and deliver results under pressure. For 3 years, Marcus had avoided those challenges by working alone. Now he was about to discover whether his retreat from collaborative innovation had been protective wisdom or limiting fear. The Meridian Financial Integration Project became Marcus's trial by fire, transforming him from a hidden problem solver into a visible technical leader under the most challenging circumstances possible. The 2-week deadline was aggressive, even for a team of senior developers working with familiar technologies. But Meridian's compliance requirements added layers of complexity that made the timeline nearly impossible. Marcus spent his first weekend as senior systems architect in the office, working with Tom Bradley to understand Meridian's data architecture and compliance protocols. The regulatory requirements were Byzantine in their complexity, involving real-time transaction monitoring, audit trail preservation, and security protocols that needed to integrate seamlessly with Summit's existing software platform. Marcus, Tom said as they reviewed Meridian's technical specifications for the 3rd time. I've been thinking about what you said regarding collaboration being dangerous. I wanted you to know that whatever happened at your previous company, this team isn't going to steal credit for your work. Marcus looked up from the compliance documentation he'd been studying. I appreciate that, Tom. But it's not just about credit. It's about the risk that comes with dependence on other people's competence and integrity. Tom nodded thoughtfully. I understand the trust issues, but Marcus, this project is too big for any one person, regardless of their technical skills. If we're going to meet Meridian's deadline, we need to function as a coordinated team. The challenge became apparent on Monday morning when Marcus attempted to divide the project into manageable components that could be developed in parallel. Meridian's compliance system required integration points that were interdependent in ways that made traditional project management approaches ineffective. Sarah Kim identified the core problem during the team's first technical meeting. Marcus, the user interface components can't be developed independently of the database architecture, and the database structure can't be finalized without understanding the API requirements. Everything depends on everything else. Marcus studied the project flowchart they'd created, recognizing a familiar dilemma from his neural sync days. Complex technical projects often required iterative development processes that were difficult to manage through traditional team structures. What if we approach this differently? Marcus suggested. Instead of dividing the project into separate components, what if we develop everything simultaneously through paired programming and continuous integration? David Park looked confused. Paired programming? Marcus, that typically slows down development rather than accelerating it. Not if the pairs are working on interdependent problems, Marcus explained. Tom and I work on database architecture while Sarah and David handle interface development. But we're in constant communication, making real-time adjustments as we discover integration requirements. The approach was unorthodox, but necessary given the project's complexity and timeline. Marcus found himself functioning as both technical architect and project coordinator, making decisions about system design while managing the collaborative process he'd been avoiding for 3 years. The first major challenge came on Wednesday when Meridian's technical team requested a demonstration of core functionality. Marcus's team had been working for 3 days, but the integrated system was still in pieces that wouldn't compile into a working demonstration. "We need to show them something functional," Sarah said during an emergency team meeting. Meridian's IT director is expecting to see actual integration capabilities, not just technical specifications. Marcus felt the familiar pressure of visibility and accountability that had made him retreat into technical support. But Morrison's confidence in his abilities and his team's willingness to collaborate gave him the motivation to push through his comfort zone. "We'll build a functional prototype," Marcus decided. Simplified versions of the core integration features, but working together as a complete system. "Tom, can you set up a development database with sample compliance data?" Tom nodded. "I can have that ready in 4 hours." "Sarah, I need user interface mockups that show the compliance monitoring workflow. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to demonstrate how Meridian's staff would interact with the system." Sarah was already sketching interface designs on her whiteboard. "I can have wireframes ready by this afternoon." "David, we need API endpoints that can handle compliance data queries and transaction logging. Basic functionality that proves the integration concept." David looked skeptical. "Marcus, that's a lot of development work for 1 day. Are you sure this is realistic?" Marcus felt the weight of the team's trust and Morrison's expectations. "It's realistic if we work together efficiently, but it requires everyone to trust each other's technical judgment and avoid second-guessing decisions in real time." The next 18 hours tested Marcus's technical skills and leadership abilities in ways that his years of solitary programming hadn't prepared him for. Coordinating 4 developers working on interdependent code required constant communication, rapid decision-making, and the ability to resolve technical disagreements without damaging team dynamics. But something unexpected happened during those intensive development sessions. Marcus discovered that collaboration, when managed properly, could actually accelerate innovation rather than constraining it. Tom's database expertise identified optimization opportunities that Marcus hadn't considered. Sarah's interface design skills created user experience solutions that made the compliance monitoring more intuitive. David's API development background helped streamline the integration protocols. By Thursday afternoon, they had a working prototype that demonstrated every major feature Meridian had requested. The compliance monitoring dashboard showed real-time transaction tracking. The audit trail system preserved detailed logs that met federal requirements. The integration APIs handled data synchronization between Summit's software and Meridian's existing systems. Morrison visited the development area as the team prepared for the Meridian demonstration. "How are we looking?" he asked Marcus privately. "Better than expected," Marcus replied honestly. "The team collaboration has been more effective than I anticipated. We've built something that exceeds Meridian's basic requirements." Morrison smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose gamble was paying off. "Marcus, I want you to lead the client demonstration yourself. This is your project, your technical architecture, your team's work." The suggestion made Marcus's stomach tighten with anxiety. "Mr. Morrison, I'm not sure I'm the right person for client presentations. Sarah has more experience with customer-facing demonstrations." "Sarah is an excellent developer," Morrison agreed, "but you're the senior architect who designed this system. Meridian needs to see that Summit Industries has technical leadership capable of understanding their complex requirements." The Meridian demonstration was scheduled for Friday morning in Summit's main conference room. Marcus arrived early to set up the presentation, testing every component of the prototype system to ensure it would function flawlessly during the client meeting. Meridian's technical team was led by Jennifer Walsh, their chief information officer, who had a reputation for asking detailed technical questions that exposed weak points in vendor presentations. She was accompanied by 2 senior developers and a compliance specialist who understood federal regulatory requirements better than most lawyers. "Ms. Walsh," Morrison began the meeting, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Chen, our senior systems architect, who led the development of your integration solution." Walsh studied Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone who'd sat through hundreds of vendor presentations. "Mr. Chen, I'll be honest with you. We've had 3 other software companies tell us that our compliance integration requirements couldn't be met within our timeline. What makes Summit Industries different?" Marcus felt the familiar rush of being challenged on technical competence, but this time it felt energizing rather than threatening. "Ms. Walsh, I think the difference is that we approached your requirements as an architecture problem rather than a programming problem. Instead of trying to force your compliance needs into our existing software structure, we built integration capabilities specifically designed for regulatory monitoring." Walsh leaned forward with interest. "Show me." Marcus began the demonstration with the confidence of someone presenting work he understood completely. The prototype system handled every scenario Walsh tested, from complex transaction logging to real-time compliance monitoring to audit trail generation that met federal standards. "This is impressive," Walsh admitted after testing the system for 30 minutes. "Mr. Chen, walk me through the technical architecture. How does this integration handle the data synchronization requirements?" For the next hour, Marcus answered technical questions with the precision and depth that came from having designed every component of the system personally. Walsh's skeptical expression gradually transformed into professional respect as she realized she was talking to someone who understood her requirements better than her own development team. "Ms. Walsh," Marcus said as the demonstration concluded, "I want to be clear about our implementation timeline. This prototype demonstrates core functionality, but building the complete production system will require 2 more weeks of development and testing." Walsh consulted her notes. "Mr. Chen, based on what I've seen today, I'm willing to recommend that Meridian proceed with Summit Industries for this integration. But I have one concern about the timeline." Marcus felt his team's tension as they waited for Walsh's concern. 2 weeks is still aggressive for a production system," Walsh continued. "However, if you can deliver what you've demonstrated today, the integration capabilities exceed what we expected to achieve. The compliance monitoring features alone will save our staff hundreds of hours of manual audit work." Morrison stepped forward. "Ms. Walsh, you have Marcus's commitment that Summit Industries will deliver a production-ready system that meets or exceeds the prototype's functionality." Walsh shook hands with Marcus directly. Mr. Chen, I'm impressed with your technical expertise and your team's capabilities. We'll proceed with Summit Industries for this integration. As Meridian's team left the conference room, Marcus felt a combination of relief and pride that he hadn't experienced since his neural sync days. But more importantly, he felt the satisfaction that came from successful collaboration with colleagues who had proven themselves trustworthy and competent. Sarah approached him as they packed up the demonstration equipment. Marcus, that was exceptional. The way you handled Walsh's technical questions, the depth of knowledge you demonstrated. I understand now why Morrison made you senior architect. Tom nodded in agreement. Marcus, I owe you an apology. I questioned your qualifications when I should have been asking how I could learn from your expertise. David added, the paired programming approach you suggested worked better than anything I've experienced. We accomplished more in 4 days than my previous teams usually manage in 4 weeks. Marcus looked around at his team members, realizing that his fears about collaborative betrayal had been based on one bad experience rather than fundamental problems with teamwork. These colleagues had proven themselves capable of both technical competence and professional integrity. But the real test was still ahead. Building the production system for Meridian would require 2 more weeks of intensive collaboration under pressure. Marcus would need to prove that his leadership abilities could scale from prototype development to full system implementation. More importantly, he would need to demonstrate that his retreat from the tech industry's competitive culture had been temporary rather than permanent. The skills that had made him valuable at NeuralSync were still intact, but his ability to lead technical teams and manage complex projects was still being tested. The Meridian project had transformed Marcus from an invisible problem solver into a visible technical leader. Now he needed to prove that visibility was sustainable and that collaboration could be both effective and safe. The Meridian financial integration was completed 3 days ahead of schedule, an achievement that sent ripples through both Summit Industries and the broader enterprise software community. Marcus's team had not only met every technical requirement, but had implemented additional features that exceeded Meridian's original specifications. The compliance monitoring system included predictive analytics that could identify potential regulatory violations before they occurred. The audit trail preservation exceeded federal requirements by implementing blockchain-based verification that made transaction records virtually tamper-proof. The user interface included customization options that allowed Meridian's staff to configure monitoring dashboards for different regulatory scenarios. Jennifer Walsh's feedback exceeded Morrison's most optimistic expectations. Summit Industries has delivered the most sophisticated compliance integration I've seen in 15 years of financial technology management, she wrote in her official project review. Mr. Chen's technical leadership and his team's execution capabilities represent exactly the kind of innovation our industry needs. But the recognition extended beyond client satisfaction. The integration project had caught the attention of industry analysts who tracked enterprise software developments. TechCrunch published an article titled Hidden Genius: How Summit Industries' Stealth Architect Revolutionized Compliance Integration, featuring Marcus's transformation from technical support to senior technical leadership. The article included quotes from industry experts who called Marcus's work a masterclass in technical architecture and the kind of innovation that changes entire market segments. More importantly, for Marcus personally, the article attracted attention from his former colleagues in Silicon Valley, including several who had witnessed his professional destruction at NeuralSync. Lisa Chen called her brother from Austin, her voice carrying excitement and vindication. Marcus, the TechCrunch article about your work at Summit Industries is trending on every tech platform. People are calling you a technical visionary. David Zhang must be losing his mind seeing your name in the news again. Marcus was working late in his new office, a corner space with windows overlooking Chicago's skyline that Morrison had assigned to senior architectural staff. Lisa, the recognition is nice, but I'm more interested in building sustainable success than generating media attention. Sustainable success, Lisa repeated with amusement. Marcus, you've gone from hiding in technical support to leading integration projects that are reshaping enterprise software standards. How much more sustainable can you get? The question made Marcus reflect on how much his situation had changed in just 6 weeks. The cubicle in the forgotten corner of the fourth floor had been replaced by an office that signaled senior technical authority. The worn messenger bag had been supplemented by a company laptop and development tools that represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in enterprise software licensing. But the most significant change was internal. Marcus no longer felt the constant anxiety about exposure and recognition that had driven him into technical support. Working with Tom, Sarah, and David on the Meridian project had restored his confidence in collaborative innovation and his belief that technical excellence could coexist with professional visibility. Morrison knocked on Marcus's office door, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose gamble had paid off spectacularly. Marcus, I wanted to congratulate you personally on the Meridian success. Walsh's recommendation has already generated inquiries from 3 other major financial institutions. Marcus gestured for Morrison to sit down. The team deserves the credit for execution. I provided technical architecture, but the implementation required everyone's expertise. Morrison opened the champagne and poured 2 glasses. Marcus, that's exactly the kind of leadership perspective that makes you valuable. But don't underestimate your individual contributions. The technical innovations you implemented for Meridian are being studied by our competitors as industry-leading solutions. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a call from an unknown Silicon Valley number. Marcus hesitated before answering, recognizing the area code from his neural sync days. Marcus Chen? The voice belonged to Rebecca Thompson, a venture capitalist who specialized in AI and enterprise software investments. This is Rebecca Thompson from Pinnacle Ventures. I've been following your work at Summit Industries, and I'd like to discuss some opportunities that might interest you. Marcus put the call on speaker so Morrison could hear the conversation. Ms. Thompson, I appreciate your interest, but I'm committed to my current position at Summit Industries. Thompson's laugh carried the confidence of someone who was used to changing people's minds. Marcus, I'm not talking about employment opportunities. I'm talking about investment opportunities. Your compliance integration work has attracted attention from several major enterprise clients who want to license your technical innovations. Morrison leaned forward with obvious interest. Ms. Thompson, could you be more specific about these licensing opportunities? Summit Industries has developed intellectual property that could be worth tens of millions in licensing revenue, Thompson explained. The predictive compliance algorithms, the blockchain audit verification, the adaptive user interface frameworks. These innovations have applications far beyond financial services integration. Marcus felt a familiar chill of recognition. The conversation sounded uncomfortably similar to discussions he'd had with David Zhang about commercializing NeuralSync's AI technology. Ms. Thompson, I'm not interested in licensing agreements that might compromise Summit Industries' competitive advantages. Thompson's tone shifted to more serious business discussion. Marcus, I'm not suggesting you compromise your current employer's interests. I'm suggesting you recognize the value of intellectual property you've created and ensure you receive appropriate compensation for your innovations. Morrison gestured for Marcus to continue the conversation. What kind of compensation are you suggesting? Licensing deals that could generate 7-figure annual revenues, Thompson replied immediately. Consulting agreements with Fortune 500 companies that need compliance integration solutions. Speaking engagements at industry conferences that pay substantial fees. Marcus, Your technical reputation is worth millions if it's managed properly. Marcus looked at Morrison, trying to gauge his reaction to offers that could potentially cost Summit Industries valuable intellectual property. But Morrison's expression showed interest rather than concern. "Ms. Thompson," Morrison said, "what if Summit Industries was interested in exploring these opportunities as corporate licensing rather than individual consulting?" Thompson paused, clearly adjusting her approach. "Mr. Morrison, I assume?" That's actually a more interesting conversation. Corporate licensing of Marcus's innovations could benefit both Summit Industries and the broader enterprise software market. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Thompson outlining opportunities that could transform Summit Industries from a mid-sized software company into a major player in the enterprise compliance market. Licensing deals with competitors, consulting contracts with major corporations, and partnership opportunities with financial institutions that needed advanced compliance monitoring. After Thompson ended the call, Morrison and Marcus sat in silence for several minutes, processing the implications of opportunities that neither had anticipated. "Marcus," Morrison said finally, "6 weeks ago, you were hiding in technical support to avoid recognition. Now venture capitalists are calling with 7-figure licensing opportunities. How does that feel?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "It feels like vindication, but also like a test. The question isn't whether these opportunities are valuable. The question is whether pursuing them serves genuine innovation or just feeds ego and greed." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "That's a mature perspective. But Marcus, you've earned the right to benefit from your innovations. The intellectual property you've created has value, and you shouldn't feel guilty about receiving appropriate compensation." Marcus walked to his window, looking out at the Chicago skyline while thinking about the conversation with Thompson. The offers were tempting, but they also represented the kind of visibility and commercial success that had attracted David Zhang's betrayal at Neuralink. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus said, "I want to explore these opportunities, but with protections that ensure my innovations benefit Summit Industries first and the broader market second. I don't want to repeat the mistakes I made at Neuralink." Morrison stood up to leave, extending his hand to Marcus. "Then let's work together to structure agreements that protect both your interests and the company's competitive advantages. You've proven that collaboration can be both profitable and ethical." As Morrison left the office, Marcus remained at the window, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. 3 months ago, he'd been invisible, working quietly to solve problems while avoiding the attention that might lead to recognition or betrayal. Now he was fielding calls from venture capitalists, leading technical teams on high-profile projects, and developing innovations that could reshape entire market segments. The transformation from hidden genius to recognized expert had happened faster than he'd ever imagined possible. But the real test would come when Marcus had to navigate the commercial opportunities and industry recognition without losing the technical focus and collaborative spirit that had made the transformation possible. Success in the enterprise software market required not just technical excellence, but the ability to balance innovation with business strategy, individual achievement with team collaboration, and personal recognition with corporate loyalty. The phone rang again, this time with a call from Tom Bradley. "Marcus, I just saw the TechCrunch article about our Meridian project. The phone has been ringing all afternoon with inquiries from potential clients who want to implement similar compliance integrations." Marcus smiled, feeling the satisfaction that came from technical work that generated genuine business value. "Tom, it sounds like we're going to be busy for the foreseeable future." "Marcus," Tom said, "I wanted to thank you for proving that collaboration can actually accelerate innovation rather than constraining it. Working with you on Meridian taught me more about advanced development techniques than I learned in the previous 5 years." As Marcus ended the call, he realized that his greatest achievement wasn't the technical innovations or the industry recognition. It was the discovery that hiding from collaboration had been unnecessary, that trust could be rebuilt through competence and integrity, and that individual excellence could coexist with team success. The ghost in the cubicle was gone forever, replaced by a technical leader who understood that true innovation required both exceptional individual skills and the courage to share those skills with others who deserved trust. 6 months after the Meridian integration, Summit Industries had transformed from a mid-sized software company struggling with technical debt into a recognized leader in enterprise compliance solutions. Marcus's innovations had generated 12 major client contracts, 18 licensing agreements, and enough industry recognition to attract acquisition offers from 3 Fortune 500 technology companies. But Marcus had chosen a different path. Instead of accepting lucrative offers from larger corporations or starting his own venture-backed startup, he had worked with Morrison to establish Summit's Advanced Innovation Division, a research and development group focused on emerging technologies that could benefit enterprise clients. The division operated under principles that Marcus had developed from his experiences at both NeuralSync and Summit Industries. Collaborative innovation with clear intellectual property protections, rapid prototyping with thorough testing protocols, and market applications that prioritized client value over short-term profits. Marcus's office had been expanded to include a development lab where his team could work on experimental projects without the constraints of immediate commercial applications. The team now included Tom Bradley as senior database architect, Sarah Kim as lead interface designer, David Park as integration specialist, and 3 junior developers who had been recruited specifically for their innovative thinking rather than their traditional credentials. The lab was working on 3 major projects that could reshape enterprise software markets: an AI-powered compliance monitoring system that could adapt to changing regulatory requirements in real time, a blockchain-based audit verification platform that could provide tamper-proof transaction records for any industry, and a natural language processing interface that would allow non-technical users to configure complex software integrations through conversational commands. "Marcus," Sarah said during their weekly team meeting, "the natural language processing project is attracting attention from some unexpected quarters. We received an inquiry from the Department of Defense about potential applications for military logistics systems." Marcus looked up from the technical specifications he'd been reviewing. "DoD contracts require security clearances and compliance protocols that might complicate our development process. Are we ready for that level of regulatory oversight?" Tom nodded from across the conference table. "The security requirements are manageable, but the compliance monitoring would need to exceed even financial industry standards. On the other hand, DoD contracts come with funding levels that could support advanced research for years." David added his perspective as someone who understood the commercial implications. Military applications could also generate licensing opportunities with defense contractors and government agencies worldwide. The market potential is substantial. Marcus considered the team's input while weighing the risks and opportunities of government contracts. His experience with NeuralSync had taught him to be cautious about partnerships that might compromise intellectual property rights or limit future commercial applications. "Let's approach this carefully," Marcus decided. "We'll explore the DoD inquiry, but with clear agreements about intellectual property ownership and commercial licensing rights. I don't want to create innovations that benefit government agencies while preventing us from serving commercial clients." The conversation was interrupted by Morrison entering the conference room with Jessica Rodriguez from Human Resources and a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Robert Chen, a partner at Chen and Associates, a law firm that specialized in intellectual property protection for technology companies. "Marcus," Morrison said, "I wanted you to meet Robert Chen, no relation, who's been helping us structure licensing agreements and intellectual property protections for the Advanced Innovation Division." Robert Chen opened a leather portfolio and spread out documents that represented months of legal work. Mr. Chen, we've created a comprehensive framework that protects your innovations while allowing Summit Industries to benefit from commercial applications. Every invention you develop is jointly owned, with revenue sharing that reflects both your creative contributions and the company's investment in development resources. Marcus studied the legal documents with the caution of someone who'd been betrayed by inadequate intellectual property protections. Mr. Chen, what prevents another David Zhang situation where a business partner could steal innovations and claim ownership? Robert Chen smiled with the confidence of someone who'd anticipated the question. Multiple layers of protection, legal registration of all intellectual property, documentation of development processes that establish creation timelines, escrow accounts that preserve source code and technical specifications, and partnership agreements that require unanimous consent for any licensing or sale of innovations. Jessica Rodriguez added her perspective as someone responsible for protecting both individual employees and corporate interests. Marcus, these agreements are designed to ensure you receive appropriate compensation for your innovations while preventing the kind of exploitation you experienced at NeuralSync. Marcus spent the next hour reviewing legal documents that represented a complete framework for collaborative innovation with individual protection. The agreements were more comprehensive than anything he'd seen at previous companies, addressing every potential scenario for intellectual property disputes. This looks thorough, Marcus admitted. But I want to add one additional protection. Any innovations developed by the Advanced Innovation Division should be licensed to educational institutions and nonprofit organizations at cost. I don't want our technical advances to be available only to organizations that can afford premium licensing fees. Morrison nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of ethical approach that distinguishes Summit Industries from our competitors. Robert, can we include nonprofit licensing provisions in these agreements? Robert Chen made notes on his legal pad. Absolutely. Educational and nonprofit licensing can actually enhance the commercial value of intellectual property by demonstrating broader applications and social benefits. As the legal meeting concluded, Marcus felt a sense of security about innovation and collaboration that he hadn't experienced since his graduate school days at MIT. The framework protected his creative contributions while enabling the kind of team-based development that could tackle complex technical challenges. But the real validation came that afternoon when Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the Meridian CIO, who had become one of Summit Industries' strongest advocates in the financial services community. Marcus, Walsh said, I wanted to update you on the compliance integration results. 6 months after implementation, your system has prevented 14 potential regulatory violations, reduced our audit preparation time by 70%, and saved Meridian approximately $2.3 million in compliance costs. But more importantly, the Federal Reserve is considering adopting your blockchain audit verification as an industry standard for all financial institutions. Marcus felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with recognition or compensation. Dr. Walsh, that's exactly what we hope to achieve. Technical innovations that create genuine value for clients and improve industry standards. Marcus, there's something else, Walsh continued. The Fed wants to discuss licensing your compliance monitoring technology for implementation across the entire banking sector. We're talking about a system that could protect the financial stability of the entire country. The implications were staggering. Marcus's innovations, developed initially to solve Summit Industries' technical problems, could become the foundation for financial regulatory compliance across thousands of institutions. The potential impact went far beyond commercial success to include genuine contributions to economic stability and public welfare. After ending the call with Walsh, Marcus sat in his office contemplating how far he'd traveled from the cubicle where he'd hidden for 3 years. The technical support role that had once protected him from recognition and betrayal now seemed like a necessary preparation for the responsibilities he was accepting as a leader in enterprise software innovation. His phone buzzed with a text message from Lisa in Austin. Saw the Federal Reserve news. Dad would be proud. You've gone from fixing mom and dad's electronics shop computers to potentially stabilizing the entire banking system. That's quite a journey. The message reminded Marcus of his parents, who had immigrated to America with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone expected. They had built a successful electronics repair business by focusing on competence, integrity, and service to their community. Marcus realized he was applying the same principles to enterprise software development, but on a scale they could never have imagined. That evening, Marcus stayed late in the development lab, working on refinements to the AI-powered compliance monitoring system. The Federal Reserve's interest had highlighted opportunities for improvements that could benefit not just individual financial institutions, but the entire regulatory framework that protected consumer investments and economic stability. Tom Bradley joined him around 8 p.m., carrying coffee and wearing the focused expression of someone who understood they were working on something historically significant. Marcus, I've been thinking about the Fed's requirements for real-time monitoring across multiple institutions simultaneously. The database architecture would need to handle transaction volumes that exceed anything we've designed before. Marcus looked up from the code he'd been optimizing. Tom, what if we approach it as a distributed processing problem rather than a centralized monitoring system? Each institution maintains local compliance monitoring, but the data feeds into a federal oversight network that can identify systemic risks. Tom nodded enthusiastically. Distributed processing would solve the scalability issues, but it would also require standardized data formats across institutions that have completely different legacy systems. That's where the natural language processing interface becomes crucial, Marcus explained. Instead of requiring banks to modify their existing systems, we create adaptive translation protocols that can interpret different data formats and convert them to standardized compliance metrics. They worked until midnight, developing technical specifications for a system that could monitor compliance across the entire banking sector while respecting individual institutions' operational independence. The challenge was unprecedented in both technical complexity and potential social impact. As they prepared to leave the lab, Tom voiced a concern that had been troubling him. Marcus, are we ready for this level of responsibility? If the Federal Reserve adopts our technology and something goes wrong, we could be partially responsible for economic instability. Marcus considered the question while gathering his notes and technical specifications. Tom, that's exactly why we need to approach this with the highest possible standards for testing, documentation, and fail-safe protocols. But the alternative, letting the current compliance system continue with its vulnerabilities, poses even greater risks to economic stability. The next morning brought a conference call with Federal Reserve officials who wanted to understand the technical capabilities and limitations of Marcus's compliance monitoring innovations. The call included Dr. Patricia Morrison, the Fed's chief technology officer, and 3 senior economists who specialized in financial system stability. Mr. Chen, Dr. Morrison began, we've reviewed your compliance integration work with Meridian Financial, and we're impressed with both the technical sophistication and the practical results. However, implementing similar technology across the entire banking sector raises questions about scalability, security, and systemic risk management. Marcus had prepared for these concerns during his late-night session with Tom. Dr. Morrison, we've designed a distributed architecture that addresses scalability through localized processing and standardized reporting protocols. Each institution maintains operational independence while contributing to systemic monitoring that can identify risks before they become crises. The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Federal Reserve officials asking detailed technical questions about everything from data encryption to network security to disaster recovery protocols. Marcus answered each question with the precision that came from having designed every component of the system personally. Dr. Morrison's final question addressed the core concern. Mr. Chen, if we proceed with implementation across the banking sector, what guarantees can you provide about system reliability and security? Marcus chose his words carefully. Dr. Morrison, I can guarantee that our technology represents the most advanced compliance monitoring system currently available. But more importantly, I can guarantee that we'll continue improving and updating the system as new challenges emerge. Technology security isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process of adaptation and improvement. The Federal Reserve officials ended the call with a commitment to conduct a formal technology evaluation that could lead to industry-wide implementation. Marcus realized that his work at Summit Industries was about to scale from individual client solutions to national economic infrastructure. Morrison appeared in Marcus's office an hour after the Fed call, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing an expression of amazement. Marcus, do you understand what just happened? The Federal Reserve is considering adopting technology you developed to solve Summit Industries' technical problems as the foundation for banking regulation across the entire country. Marcus felt the weight of opportunity and responsibility in equal measure. Mr. Morrison, it's an honor, but also a significant challenge. Implementing technology at that scale requires resources and expertise that go beyond anything we've attempted before.
Morrison sat down across from Marcus's desk. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. Summit Industries is about to become a major player in financial technology infrastructure. We'll need to scale our development capabilities, hire additional senior technical staff, and establish partnerships with government agencies and regulatory bodies. The implications were transformative for both Marcus personally and Summit Industries as a company. The mid-sized software firm that had once struggled with basic technical debt was positioned to become a central player in American financial infrastructure. Mr. Morrison, Marcus said, I want to accept this challenge, but with the understanding that our primary responsibility is to public welfare rather than profit maximization. If we're going to help stabilize the financial system, we need to prioritize systemic security over shareholder returns. Morrison smiled with the expression of someone whose gamble on hidden talent had exceeded his wildest expectations. Marcus, that's exactly the ethical approach that makes you the right person to lead this initiative. Summit Industries is committed to serving the public interest while building sustainable business success. As Morrison left the office, Marcus stood at his window, looking out at Chicago's financial district, where banks and investment firms managed trillions of dollars in assets that affected the economic welfare of millions of American families. The compliance monitoring technology he'd developed to solve routine integration problems was about to become a critical component of the infrastructure that protected those families from financial instability.
The transformation from invisible technical support to recognized industry leader was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Marcus would need to prove that technical excellence could scale from individual innovation to systemic responsibility, that collaborative development could handle challenges that affected entire economic sectors, and that ethical principles could guide decisions that shaped financial policy for the world's largest economy. The cubicle in the forgotten corner of the fourth floor was a distant memory, replaced by responsibilities that would test everything Marcus had learned about innovation, collaboration, and the courage to be visible when visibility mattered most.
But for the first time since his betrayal at Neural Sync, Marcus felt ready for that level of challenge. He had built a team he could trust, developed legal protections that safeguarded his innovations, and discovered that true security came not from hiding exceptional abilities, but from using those abilities to solve problems that genuinely mattered. The phone rang with another call from a government agency interested in Marcus's technology. As he answered, Marcus realized that his greatest achievement wasn't the technical innovations or the industry recognition. It was the discovery that brilliance could be both visible and safe, that collaboration could enhance rather than threaten individual achievement, and that the most valuable innovations were those that serve purposes larger than personal success.
The hidden genius had become a public leader, but more importantly, he had learned that genius without courage to serve others was just intellectual selfishness, while genius combined with ethical responsibility could change the world in ways that mattered. Marcus Chen was no longer hiding from his potential. He was finally ready to fulfill it. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.